Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't been to one of our think tank or round table sessions before, they're very hard to explain. The only thing I can say is that what normally happens is the first 1 or 2 minutes it seems quite awkward, and you'll wonder whether the conversation will start. And in 60 minutes, in an hour, when the think tank's finished, our biggest problem is trying to stop everyone talking because the conversation gets quite deep. So just select the round table that you think is nearest. You can move around a bit as well, but the round tables are driving efficiencies in inbound supply chain through innovative solutions and standardization, saving costs by using alternative modes that will come over time, road logistics distribution, the CMV Act and the need for complementary modes of transportation, building a framework for the next generation supply chain, Indian Automotive Logistics 2020, are we ready? Changes and best practices in the aftermarket supply chain. So, perhaps I'm not sure that the titles give you a complete explanation of what they are, so I can only suggest that you dip a toe in the water, join one that might be close to something that you might be interested in, and just join in the discussion. At the end of the actual round tables, at about 3 o'clock, we'll call on the leaders of the round tables just to give a very brief overview of what the round table main points were. So I hope that gives you a bit of an explanation. Enjoy the next hour. I'm sure you will and get lots of value from it, and we look forward to hearing the report at the end. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid your time's up. So I hope you had a fruitful hour and that you had some good discussions. Because there was some people who wanted to join different tables and you could only choose one. I just wanted to go round the round tables and get a very brief overview on the main points that were discussed on each round table. So if I start off with driving efficiencies in inbound supply chain through innovative solutions and standardization, I'll go to the moderator or the leader of that session, DK Rai, to give us a quick summary, please.
Thank you, Louis. So we had an interesting subject like rest of the groups had. And we started with the disruptive technologies, like innovative solutions, and the group came up with some very wild ideas like, plant on the wheel. So while the component moves, can you keep on adding value, and by the time it arrives at OEM or somebody, it is already in almost half of the form it is supposed to be. So we found that, okay, it's quite an idea, but not doable as of now. Second was also people talked about whether, 3D printing kind of things, and then you bring only sheet metal and you come up with the chassis completely out. So we said, okay, that's also very innovative, but probably part of unknown. So we did not discuss much on that, and we had a quite diverse group. So we have 2-3 OEMs and 2-3 suppliers and 2-3 service providers like us. We talked about, can we do something like digital documents so that the physical documentation reduces in inbound supply chain. But that again involves a lot of policy makers and government and a lot of things. So we said, okay, that's also very interesting idea, but probably not something doable as of now, immediate basis. And third, very interesting point, we said, today we are producing around 3 million passenger vehicles, total cars, etc. And then we are predicted to be 15 million or 18 million kind of thing in 7-10 years. And if that is the number, we also examined that we have got now more than 120 models in the market, Whereas if you see China, probably 320 plus kind of models are there in market. So do we need to have 120 supply chains designed all the time? And the product life is squeezing further, 2 to 3 years, you'll be designing supply chain all the time, which will be completely customized to your need. And then how do you collaborate and how do you bring the efficiencies into the supply chain, especially for inbound? So we said, okay, can we agree on some standards? And packaging being the very basic unit of supply chain, especially for inbound, the group feels that probably that's the area where we can agree on some sizes at least, and we can start with. Few people also shared the example of some of the evolved and developed markets like Germany, where the VDA does define some sizes, which helps them to decide further the MHE standardization, racking, transportation, warehousing, and everything else. So part is part. Alternator here for Tata Motors or Mahindra or Hyundai, Maruti, it's the same. So can we arrive at certain standard of sizes? Also, we came to know that there is already a progress made. There are people who are using standard footprints, knowingly, unknowingly, and it is helping them to generate value over the supply chain. Also, there is a paper which has been published by industry body, CII. They have published a paper named RSTP, Racking, Handling, Transportation, and Palletization. I'll be very happy to share that paper with all the people here on the table and also the people who will be interested. So it talks about certain standards. So I think it's a good starting point for us, because then some of the benefits can be shared among all the users, and assets which are being invested by service providers, etc., will not remain idle for quite empty legs. So in brief, that was the outcome of our discussion. Thanks, Louis. Yep.
Thank you very much. That sounds like you had a fruitful hour and that you got some good value out of it. So next on to the next table was looking at saving cost by using alternative modes will come over time. So that was a big theme over the 2 days on multimodal. So over to Umesh Bhanot from APO Logistics VASCOR.
In fact, number 2 and 3 are virtually together, the two groups. We had an interesting discussion and we had a good representation. We had people from the component side, we had OEMs, we had service providers from all the 3 modes, road, rail, and coastal. That made for a good group and a good discussion as well. Now, starting with cost, the group discussed that, of course, it's been discussed in the past 1.5 days that there is an imminent increase in costs that is likely, especially with the truck regulations kicking into place. But the important thing, the important conclusion arrived at was cost should not just be taken as the transportation cost. There are various elements to cost. There would be costs to missing a deadline, that means transit delays. There are costs towards damages, apart from just costs to transportation. So when we talk of cost, you have to take a holistic view rather than just focusing on the transport part of it only. Going ahead to different modes. Now, well, I think there are different modes, sea, rail, surface. These are the different modes available. Costs are high over different distances. Now, every mode has its suitability. There is a threshold distance that we discussed, which beyond which a certain mode is in a position to deliver some good economics, and it is that mode that has to be preferred. Now, the next question is, how does all this happen? How do you do all these things? How do you get cost savings, and what do you do over this long term? Now there were very interesting discussions around that. First and foremost, the interface between the OEMs and the logistics service providers has to be more strategic rather than just being transactional. So it has to mean sharing of more information, sharing of your cost structures, standardization of those cost structures, so that the OEMs trust the logistics service providers who in turn trust the OEMs, and well, you have a cost which is carefully and clearly defined, because I think that building up of trust is something which is of the utmost importance. Having done that, there is a long-term commitment to each mode that is important. Now, here, when I say long-term, it means a commitment to the tenure of the agreement, so that the service provider investing in a different mode can invest in different elements of the ecosystem which are required for that mode to deliver. And then comes the question of volumes. So there is a commitment of volumes to each mode. There is a commitment that trucks will not wait, for example, because that is what commitment of volumes equates to as far as trucks are concerned. So elimination of waste by, so apart from commitment, elimination of waste by ways of reducing waiting time of trucks, waiting time of other modes, that was the other important thing. To make all this possible, there is a hand-holding required of the kind that was witnessed in the 80s and 90s, where the auto industry really powered India to where it is at present today. It is seen as the export hub of the world. Now, it is that spirit of cooperation which was shown in those days which is required. And what we discussed was that there used to be a system in the 80s and prior when it was a system of driver jockeys that used to move cars from production to consumption points. But, well, over a period of time, innovations were done, car carriers were developed, train wagons were developed. Now, it is the same hand-holding interface which is required between OEMs and service providers, working with a slightly longer term horizon in mind, with a commitment to building up these things, and simultaneously asking the government and regulatory agencies for whatever relief is required. We also discussed the fact that government is very receptive these days. Captain Kohli and myself, we've had experience of dealing with various government agencies over the past year and a half, and we shared our experiences of government agencies and public sector undertakings being very, very responsive. So we are finding an atmosphere of great receptivity. And I think the time is now when I think one can actually join hands and, well, I think have these long-term cost savings into effect. So that was the sum and substance of our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umesh. That sounds, again, fruitful discussion, and good to see the sort of positivity that we're hearing in these discussions. The next one we'll be looking at is building a framework for the next generation supply chain. And that was chaired by Bajaj. Rajiv.
Thanks, Louis. Good evening, everybody. We also had a very interesting group. The next generation always focuses our mind on problems and opportunities at the same time. We also had a mixed representation of inbound, outbound research, and also Bill was there from the US to give us some of the perspectives there. The broad conclusions are as follows. Clearly, the next generation supply chain will be framed around two important good changes in India. If you look at the next 5 to 10 years, clearly there will be infrastructure improvement, not to the level that we want, but some improvement for sure. And clearly the GST and the enabling state regulations will make some life easy, which will impact lead time in the supply chain in a positive way. What everybody is very convinced is that something that will drive improvements right from now onwards is going to be technological advancement, and visibility and connectivity and integrated flow of information will provide benefits to all parties in the supply chain. There will not be one standard solution out here, but people will start using right from devices, sensors, and RFID to take some of the flow of information away. Things will get automatically captured. GPS and digital technologies will allow enablement of transparency of where things are in the supply chain. And all of this, when it starts to go into a central database, which is either going to be run by the OEM or going to be run by the LSP, it will not just provide information, but also analytics from that database will enable better decision making, whether it is the production line planning based on what dealers are ordering and what is selling at the dealers, or it is parts planning based on the flow of this information. So again, as an outcome, we should start seeing slightly lower inventory, maybe better satisfaction on both sides. This one, people are convinced will happen faster, and people, different companies are at different stages of moving on this. The place where a lot needs to be done, I think collaboration, we all know, a lot needs to be done. Whether the OEMs are going to come together to collaborate, everybody doubts that. It'll probably be the LSPs and service providers which will create that collaboration. And the other thing that is sort of behind is standardization. I think something that is, the example of what 40-foot containers and 20-foot containers have done to the whole world is just connected and make things better and easier. So standardization is still behind, and I think standardization is probably not that much very clear as to how that will move. But collaboration, technological advancement, and a clear improvement of infrastructure in GST would probably create the framework for the next-gen supply chain, which will be around lower inventories and higher satisfaction and lower costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. And now the final round table, which is Indian Automotive Logistics 2020, Are We Ready? I'm wondering if it should have been Indian Automotive Logistics 2015, Are We Ready? But let's see what our moderator, Ketan Shah from UTI, discussed.
Yeah. Thanks, Louis. Hopefully it's working. Okay. So we had a great discussion over here, and we had a mixed group of people over here, people from logistics providers, OEMs, and people from the packaging side of it too over here. And I think for the Indian logistics, right, we are talking about double-digit growth in the next 5 years. We've talked about, over the last 2 days, we've talked about multimodal transportations. That's the next big thing that is required to make this successful. Okay. But that is still a few years away, right? We're talking about 8-10 years away where everything will actually be in place. So we need to actually start thinking about multimodal network efficiencies right now to figure out how IT systems, how communication is actually going to work between these modes to make the entire supply chain a lot more transparent, okay? The reason being is because there are so many different entities that actually play between the manufacturing of raw materials, inbound logistics, OEM producing the cars, getting it out to the customers. There are so many different people that interact, and there is a need for a more transparent system where everybody can see what's happening in the supply chain, okay? The other thing that we talked about to be ready for 2020 is the need for collaborative logistics, okay? We've heard in the presentations that there is a lot of waste within this current system today, okay? And just like what Rajiv was saying right now, it seems to be a common thing where logistics service providers need to do their part, where they're going to connect different OEMs and different tier 1s to figure out how to drive that waste out of the system, how to make sure that be it whatever part in the supply chain, be it transportation, how do you actually reduce the waste out of it? How do you actually have a lot more cube utilization within the trucks and ship less air? So, of course, that is something that is required from the industry. The key message that our group actually said is that for India specifically, okay, now is the time to actually get it right, okay? We are in a point where the logistics systems is mature enough. We've made a lot of progress over the last 10 years. Now is the time to actually get it right to be ready for 2020. And IT talked about it being a key enabler for us, talking about cloud computing and making sure that all those systems, are they really necessary? At least basic end-to-end visibility in the supply chain is the minimum that is required for this industry. One of the key things that we talked about, okay, given that we are talking about so many different entities within the supply chain, the main thing is that to be ready for such high volume of production, we need to make sure that there is accurate forecast visibility. Okay, OEMs have to get to a point where they are providing the right amount of forecast information to the different service providers that they interact with, so that there is better planning. Okay, the waste is absolutely going to go down. So that was one key thing. That was a request from the group to all the OEMs and the tier ones, is to provide better visibility in terms of forecast. We don't do a very good job at it. It's not rocket science. People actually need to sit together and create a forum where they actually think about how to deal with market volatility by a better forecast so that people can plan. And one last thing that we actually talked about was, especially in India, okay, logistics is still, in fact, all OEMs that believe in lean manufacturing principles consider logistics as a waste, okay? It's not really a waste anymore. It has become such an integral part of the system that without somebody moving your boxes, without somebody bringing the parts to you, you're not going to make any cars, okay? It's as simple as that. So one thing that is absolutely required is better education for the people, for the engineers that are coming out, for the management people that are coming out from the universities. One thing that we believe is, at least from this group, is that we need to make sure that as part of, it's our responsibility, okay, as service providers, OEMs, and other tier ones here, is to actually work with the education department or the education ministry to develop curriculums that can actually breed engineers that are going to help the supply chain, okay? And the other things that we've talked about is how do OEMs actually go to the universities and bring in engineers for internship while they are studying to make sure that they are ready for the next phase of growth that we are going to expect. So, thank you, Louis.
Thank you very much. It sounded to me like the summaries showed that the roundtables were interesting, that there were good discussions, relevant, and something that you can carry forward. If there's anything we at Automotive Logistics, whether it's for our magazines or whether it's for our events through our websites, please let us know anything we can do to help these discussions carry forward. And perhaps some of the things that we've learned from the roundtables we can also bring to the conference in 2016.